All right, let's dive into NVIDIA. The company everyone's talking about, crushing it in AI, gaming, all that. I mean, their stock up 230% this year. That's wild.
Yeah, makes you wonder how'd they get here.
Right. So we're going deep, not just like facts and dates, but the choices, the moments that made NVIDIA, well, NVIDIA.
Exactly. We've got this awesome video. It's from Global Money Talk called The Origin of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang's Vision and Beginnings of a Tech Giant. Tons of info, and we'll break it all down.
So it's about learning from their climb to the top.
For sure. And you can't talk about NVIDIA without talking about Jensen Huang, the co-founder. Born in Taiwan, 1963. Parents, a chemist and English teacher, really pushed that whole science and tech thing.
I bet their house was like a science fair every day.
Haha, maybe. But bet this, when Jensen's about 10, they got to flee Thailand, political unrest, and immigrate to the U.S.
Wow, huge change.
Huge. His dad had this, picture-perfect American dream in mind, but the reality, pretty rough. Discrimination, tough school, could have been a total setback.
Yeah, some people, that breaks them.
But Jensen, he uses education as his way out, gets electrical engineering degrees, first Oregon State, then Stanford. Those struggles just fueled him,
That's interesting. You can see that same, never give up attitude in NVIDIA itself.
Totally. It's part of their DNA. Anyway, Jensen graduates, starts at AMD, designing microprocessors, then to LSI Logic, gets all this experience, engineering, marketing, the whole deal. And here's where things get interesting. He gets hooked on computer graphics.
Now, to get why that's a big deal, got to think back then, computers were so different.
Right. They weren't about fancy visuals. It was all data processing. Monitors, as we know them, barely existed. Output was often on punch cards, impossible to understand.
So graphics weren't just about looking cool. They were making computers, actually usable.
100%. As screens got common, it was obvious CPUs weren't built for graphics. Great at data, but terrible at pushing pixels, making visuals.
So you needed a whole different kind of hardware just for graphics.
Exactly. Companies like Apple were already trying color graphics. That Apple II, back in '77, resolution 280 by 192. Then IBM, they made huge progress, CGA, VGA standards. Those classic 640 by 480 resolutions, 256 colors.
That was a huge leap forward back then.
Massive. But Jensen, he saw something even bigger. This wasn't just about prettier games. It was a whole new way to use computers, immersive experiences, visualizing complex data.
Okay, so 1993, this big dinner with Chris Malachowski and Curtis Priem, these guys become the co-founders.
Picture this. 3 brilliant guys, super passionate, all agreeing the hardware they need, it just doesn't exist. So what do? They decide, let's build it ourselves.
That's got to be a crazy moment, and that's how NVIDIA is born.
Yep. The name itself, from Latin NVIDIA, means envy. They wanted to create visuals so good, everyone would be jealous. Ambitious, right?
Yeah, bold move.
But here's where things got, a little tense. Same time NVIDIA's forming, Intel, the king of computers, they also want in on multimedia. They announced this NSP technology, super powerful multimedia CPU, meant to do it all, data, audio, video, basically stepping on NVIDIA's turf.
Whoa. Talk about intimidation. Tiny startup versus the giant. What did NVIDIA do? Did they back down?
That's the really interesting part, and we'll dig into that next time.
Last time we left off with Intel, the big dog, kind of stepping on NVIDIA's toes. So what happens next? How did they handle that?
They didn't back down. It was Intel's move, actually, confirmed they were on the right track. But they had this, key insight that really set them apart.
What was that?
Well, they realized even a super powerful CPU, it just can't do everything well. Imagine trying to write a book and compose music at the same time. Your brain would fry, right?
Yeah, too much multitask.
Same for CPUs. They figured a specialized chip built just for graphics would be way more efficient, way more powerful than cramming everything into one CPU.
Okay, so they go all in on this dedicated graphics hardware.
Exactly. And that leads to their first chip, the NV1, launched in 1995.
And was it an instant hit? Did it take off?
Well, not really. They hit a snag. See, they had designed it for this specific 3D graphics tech called quadratic texture mapping.
Quadratic texture what now?
Yeah, it's kind of technical, but basically it was a way to make smooth, curved surfaces in 3D. They thought it'd be the standard, but, the industry had other plans.
So it flopped.
Kinda. The industry went with polygonal rendering, worked better for those complex 3D games back then. Think of it like polygonals building with Legos, lots of little flat pieces to make a shape. Quadratic was more like sculpting clay, smooth curves, but not as good for complex stuff.
So the NV1, it just wasn't compatible with how most games were being made. Tough break.
Definitely a setback. But, and this is important, they didn't give up. They pivoted fast, made a new chip, NV2, that worked with the industry standard.
So they adapted, learned from it, kept going.
Exactly. And that being able to adapt, it's like a core part of NVIDIA. But they also realized just making powerful hardware wasn't enough. They needed to do more.
Like what?
They needed a whole ecosystem around their hardware, so they focused on software tools, drivers, stuff, to make it easy for game developers to use their GPUs. Provided resources, support, and made their tech easy to use, attractive to those devs.
They're not just selling a product, but building a whole community around it.
You got it. They understood their success depended on those developers using their tech. And that focus on devs, it paid off big time. By the late 90s, they were a major player in graphics cards. But they didn't just stop there.
This is where they start thinking bigger, beyond just gaming.
You're catching on. They saw their tech could do way more. Remember, NVIDIA's chips, they were amazing at parallel processing, doing tons of calculations at once. And guess what? That's not just useful for graphics.
So all that gaming focus actually set them up for something even bigger. So what did they do with that?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, and we'll pick it up there next time.
Okay, so last time we were talking about NVIDIA seeing that their tech could go way beyond just gaming. What happened next?
Well, they started exploring, testing the waters. They saw their chips could handle these super complex calculations, stuff needed for like scientific research, medical imaging, even, get this, artificial intelligence.
Wow, so their gaming success, it was almost like a happy accident. They were sitting on this tech that could change, like, everything.
Exactly. And one of the big turning points, 2006, they launched CUDA. It's a platform lets developers use GPUs for, like, any kind of computing, not just graphics.
So what made CUDA so important?
Think of it this way. Before CUDA, GPUs were like super specialized tools, really good at one thing, making those graphics. But CUDA, it was like turning them into a Swiss Army knife, Suddenly, researchers, developers, anyone, they could use the power of GPUs, even if they weren't graphics experts.
So it was like opening up this whole new world of possibilities.
Right, and this happened right when deep learning was taking off. That's AI that needs tons of data, crazy complex algorithms. GPUs, with all their parallel processing power, they were perfect for it.
So NVIDIA was in the right place at the right time with the right tech. Kind of lucky, huh?
Well, maybe some luck, but also they had the vision to see it. They had the hardware, the software, and they understood how it all fit into this AI revolution that was just getting started. And, we see the results everywhere today. NVIDIA's tech, it's in self-driving cars, medical research, even the algorithms that, suggest stuff you might like online.
It's amazing going from, like, this little startup to a company that's shaping the future. What do you think, what was the most important thing that led to their success?
That's tough. It's not just one thing, right? It's Jensen Huang, his leadership, their ability to adapt, their focus on developers, and, seeing opportunities and going for it.
Yeah, they never seemed afraid to take risks, to change when they needed to, and always pushing to see what's possible.
And that's a good lesson for everyone, I think. Innovation, it's messy. There's going to be setbacks, challenges, but the key is to keep learning, keep adapting, and just try to make something amazing.
So for everyone listening, what's the big takeaway from NVIDIA's story?
It shows us that huge innovations, they can come from anywhere. Who thought a gaming company would be leading the way in AI? It's about being curious, being able to adapt, and being open to new ideas. And even the biggest companies, they start somewhere. They face problems, make mistakes, but it's how they learn and grow that really matters.
It's kind of inspiring, right? The future is full of potential. Something that seems small today could be the next big thing. We've got to stay curious, explore new stuff, and see the potential even when others don't.
Yeah, that's the challenge and the opportunity.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into NVIDIA. Hope you found it interesting. Catch you next time.